Major Nathan Hayes smiled as he pressed the button that would kill 6 of his own men. He was standing in an air-conditioned command tent, coffee in one hand, a satellite phone in the other. And when the confirmation came back that the team had crossed into the kill zone, he did not flinch. He simply said, "Good. Send the coordinates to our friends." 6 American soldiers were walking into an ambush he had arranged, and the man who ordered it felt nothing but relief. His secret was safe, his money was coming, and the only person who would ever suspect him was a young captain named Emily Carter, who he had already decided would take the blame. Before we go any further, I want to ask you one small thing. If stories about loyalty, betrayal, and the soldiers who never give up mean something to you, please subscribe to this channel and follow this story all the way to the end. And leave a comment telling me what city you are watching from, because I truly want to see how far Emily's story travels around the world. Now let us begin. Emily Carter did not remember the sound of the explosion. She remembered the silence after it. For 18 months, she had lived with that silence, and no matter where she went, it followed her. It sat with her in the dark. It waited for her when she closed her eyes. 6 men had trusted her, 6 men had walked beside her, and 6 men were gone, and the world had decided that she was the reason. Officially, the United States Army called her a traitor. That was the word they used in the reports. Traitor. They said Captain Emily Carter had failed her team. They said her decisions had led them into disaster. They said she was reckless, that she had ignored protocol, that the blood of 6 elite operators was on her hands. And when the story was finished, when every document was signed and every file was closed, they erased her. Her rank, her honors, her name, all of it gone. But Emily knew the truth. She had not failed them. She had not betrayed them. She had loved them like family, and she had watched them die, and she had spent every single day since then hunting the one man responsible. Major Nathan Hayes. She whispered his name to herself in the desert at night, the way other people might whisper a prayer. Not out of hate, not only out of hate, she whispered it because saying it out loud reminded her that she was not crazy, that she had not imagined it, that the man who smiled at her funeral for her career was the same man who had sold her team to the enemy. It had started so simply. That was the part that still haunted her. There had been no dramatic warning, no obvious sign. There had only been a mission order, clean and official, signed by a man everyone trusted. She could still hear Commander Daniel Reed's voice the morning they deployed. "You nervous, Carter?" he had asked her. "No, sir," she had said. "Liar," he had answered, and he had grinned at her the way an older brother grins at a younger sister. "Everybody's nervous. The ones who say they aren't are the ones who get people killed. Stay nervous. Stay sharp." Daniel Reed had been the kind of leader men would follow into fire because they knew he would walk in front of them. He talked about his soldiers like they were his own children. He knew the names of their wives, their kids, their wrongs. He remembered birthdays. He carried a small notebook where he wrote down the things his men told him so he would never forget a single detail of a single life he was responsible for. A commander who forgets his people, he told Emily once, isn't a commander, he's just a man with rank. She had believed that. She still believed it. It was one of the reasons she could not stop. There had been Sergeant Thomas Walker too. Thomas had 2 little girls back home, and he never stopped talking about them. Before every mission, he kissed a photograph he kept folded in his vest, and he would say the same thing every time quietly, almost like a joke that had stopped being funny and become sacred. One more than home. One more than home. You say that every time, Walker, Emily had teased him once. And every time it's true, he had said. One day it'll be the last one. Then I go home, and I never leave that porch again. Just me, my girls, in a very uncomfortable rocking chair. He never made it to that porch. Specialist Kevin Miller had a ring in his pocket, an engagement ring he had bought for a girl named Sarah, and he was terrified of losing it. Not losing it in a firefight, losing it before he could give it to her. What if I don't come back, and she never even knows I was going to ask, he had said to Emily in one of those late-night conversations that soldiers have when the fear finally slips out. You'll come back, she had told him, and she'll say yes, and you'll spend the rest of your life complaining about wedding planning. He had laughed. God, he had laughed. And there was Jason Cole, the youngest, barely more than a boy, really, with a face that had not caught up to the uniform he wore. Jason wrote letters to his mother that he never mailed because he said if she read how scared he was, she would worry, and she worried enough already. You think I'm a coward, Captain? he had asked her one night. No, Emily had said. I think you're the bravest one here. Cowards don't feel fear, Jason. They just don't care. You feel it and you do the job anyway. That's the whole thing. That's all courage ever is. Marcus Hill was the medic, the one who patched everyone up, the one who put himself between danger and the wounded without a second of hesitation. And Anthony Cruz was the communications man, the one who had grown up with nothing, no father, no real family, and who used to say the Army was the first place that ever felt like home. You're my family now, Cruz had told her, once embarrassed by his own honesty. All of you. Don't tell anybody I said that. I won't, Emily had promised. She kept that promise. She never told anybody, but she never forgot it either. 6 men, 6 lives, 6 stories she carried like stones in her chest. And one man who ended all of them for money. The mission had been in Syria, a high-value target, they were told. Intelligence said it was a soft entry, minimal resistance in and out before dawn. The kind of mission the team had done 100 times. Emily had been positioned on Overwatch High on a ridge, her rifle covering their approach. She had seen it before anyone else did. Through her scope, she had watched the shadows move, where there should have been no shadows. She had counted the shapes taking positions. Enemy fighters, not the handful they had been briefed on. Dozens, waiting, placed with the kind of precision that only comes when someone knows exactly where their prey is going to be. She had keyed her radio, her voice tight and fast. Reed, this is Carter. Abort, abort. It's a trap. You're walking into a full ambush. Do you copy? Say again, Carter. They're waiting for you. They knew you were coming. Somebody knew. Pull back, now. And then the radio had gone strange. There had been static, then a voice that was not Daniel Reed's, a cold, calm voice cutting across the channel from somewhere far away. Major Nathan Hayes. Captain Carter, hold your position. That's an order. The mission proceeds as planned. Sir, they're compromised. The enemy is dug in. This is an ambush. We have to abort. Negative. You will hold. You will not fire until I authorize it. Is that understood? She had frozen. For one terrible second, the discipline of a lifetime, the years of following orders, the trust she had placed in the chain of command, all of it had held her still. That second was the one she would relive for the rest of her life. Because in that second, the first explosion tore through the street below. After that, there had been no orders. There had been only chaos and gunfire and Emily screaming into a radio that no one was answering, firing round after round into an enemy that outnumbered her team 10-1. She had killed. She had killed more men that night than on any night of her life. And it had not been enough. It was never going to be enough. The trap had been too perfect. She had heard them die. She had heard Kevin Miller shout Sarah's name. She had heard Thomas Walker say one last time in a voice full of blood, "One more than home." She had heard Daniel Reed giving orders until the very end, trying to save his men, refusing to save himself. And she had heard Jason Cole, the youngest. He had crawled to cover, somehow wounded, and he had found a radio, and the last thing he ever said was to her, Captain, are you there?" "I'm here, Jason. I'm here. Stay with me. Tell my mom." His voice had been so calm, so impossibly calm. "Tell my mom I wasn't scared." "Okay, tell her I wasn't scared." "You tell her yourself. You hold on, and you tell her yourself." "Tell her, Captain, please." And then the radio had gone quiet. Emily had gone down that ridge alone. She had walked into the aftermath with her rifle empty and her hands shaking, and she had found them one by one shot. She had closed Daniel Reed's eyes. She had taken the folded photograph from Thomas Walker's vest. She had found Kevin Miller's ring still in his pocket, still meant for a girl who would never wear it. She had carried what she could carry and remembered the rest. And then the Army had come, and instead of asking her what happened, they had accused her of causing it. The betrayal had been so complete, so total, that at first she had not even understood it. She had sat in a small gray room while officers she had never met read a report that described a version of events that had never happened. A version where Emily Carter had disobeyed orders, where Emily Carter had opened fire prematurely, where Emily Carter had triggered the ambush that killed her own team. "That's not true," she had said. "None of that is true. Major Hayes ordered me to hold. He told me not to fire. He knew. He had to have known." The officer across the table had looked at her with something that was almost pity. "Captain Major Hayes has an exemplary record. There is no evidence of any order matching your description. The comms logs don't support your account." Then the logs were changed. That's a very serious accusation. So is calling me a traitor. But it had not mattered. Nathan Hayes had covered his tracks with the skill of a man who had planned every detail long before the first shot was fired. The communications logs had been altered. Witnesses had been arranged. And the version of the truth that survived was the one that pointed at Emily. She understood slowly why he had chosen her. She was Overwatch. She was alone up on that ridge. There was no one to confirm her story and no one to contradict his. She was in the cold logic of a man like Nathan Hayes, the perfect person to blame. He had needed a scapegoat, and she had been standing in exactly the right place. She remembered the last time she saw him. It had been in a corridor after the hearing. He had walked past her slowly, and he had leaned in close enough that only she could hear, and he had said something she would never forget. "You should have fired when I told you not to, Carter. Then at least you'd have died with them. Now you have to live with it." And he had smiled. That smile was the thing that saved her in the end, because standing in that corridor stripped of her rank called a traitor by the country she had bled for Emily, Carter had wanted to die. She had wanted to disappear. She had wanted the silence to finally take her. But that smile lit something inside her that refused to go out. She did not disappear because she wanted to live. She disappeared because she wanted the truth to live. Her father had taught her that long before any of this. Colonel Michael Carter had been a soldier, hard and quiet and impossible to impress. Emily had spent her whole childhood trying to earn a nod from him, a single word of approval. Her mother used to say the two of them were made of the same stubborn iron and that one day would either bring them together or break them apart. He had died 3 years before Syria. Cancer. Quiet and cruel the way it takes strong men and makes them small. And in the last weeks of his life, when the medals meant nothing and the rank meant nothing, and all that was left was a father and his daughter, he had said things to her that she had not fully understood until much later. "You know what the hardest part of the job is, Em?" he had asked her from his hospital bed, his voice thin. The fighting, she had guessed. No, he had shaken his head. The fighting is easy. Any fool can fight. The hardest part is knowing what you owe people and paying it, even when nobody's watching, especially when nobody's watching. "I don't understand." "You will." He had reached out and taken her hand, and his grip had still been strong even then. A real soldier never abandons the people who trust them. Not their team, not their country, not the truth. You hear me? When everyone else walks away, that's when it counts. That's the whole job, Em. That's the only part that matters. "What if the cost is too high?" she had asked him. He had looked at her for a long moment. "The right thing and the survivable thing," he had said slowly, "are not always the same. And a soldier who only does the right thing when it's safe was never a soldier at all. He was just wearing the uniform." She had not understood it then. She had thought it was the kind of thing dying men say, beautiful and vague and impossible to actually live by. She understood it now, because now she was living it alone in the Syrian desert, hunted by the very country she was trying to save. For 18 months, she had survived on almost nothing. She moved constantly. She trusted no one. She used skills her father had taught her and skills the army had given her, the same army that now wanted her erased. She scavenged, she hid, she watched. And piece by piece, she built her case against Nathan Hayes. It was slow and it was dangerous and it was maddening. Every time she got close to something solid, it slipped away. A contact would vanish. A document would turn out to be a dead end. A lid would nearly get her killed. Hayes was not just a traitor. He was careful. He was connected. He had built a network of corruption that reached farther than she had ever imagined. And pulling on one thread only revealed how much more there was to unravel. She learned that he was selling more than information. He was selling operations. He was selling soldiers. American units deployed on missions that looked legitimate on paper were being positioned as bargaining chips, as distractions, as sacrifices, so that Hayes and the men he worked with could move weapons and money and secrets through the chaos. Her team had not been the first. That knowledge nearly destroyed her. It meant that even if she had somehow saved them, Hayes would have found another way, another team, another set of names to add to his ledger. He was a machine that ran on other people's lives. She wrote it all down, everything she found. She kept it hidden, buried, coded. She told herself that one day she would walk into a room full of the right people and lay it all out and force the world to see what she had seen. But she was tired. She would not admit it to herself often, but she was tired in a way that sleep could not touch. There were nights when she looked at the evidence she had gathered and wondered if any of it would ever be enough. There were nights when the silence got so loud that she almost gave in to it. On one of those nights, she nearly quit. She had been sitting alone, her rifle across her knees, her small collection of evidence spread out in front of her, and she had thought very clearly and very calmly that she could simply stop. She could walk into the desert and let it take her. No one would ever know. No one was watching. The team was already gone. Her name was already ruined. What was the point of one broken soldier chasing a ghost through a country that wanted her dead? And then she had heard her father's voice as clearly as if he were sitting beside her. Especially when nobody's watching. She had picked up the evidence. She had put it away, and she had kept going. That was the woman she had become. Not the decorated captain, not the celebrated sniper. Something harder and lonelier than that. A ghost with a purpose. A soldier fighting a war that no one knew existed for men who could no longer thank her against an enemy who wore the same flag she once had. She did not know that everything was about to change. She did not know that the war she had been fighting in secret was about to become terribly, impossibly loud. Because Nathan Hayes was not finished. Somewhere far from Emily's hiding place in another air-conditioned room, the same cold logic was turning over again. Another operation needed cover. Another shipment needed to move. And once again, the plan required a distraction. It required chaos. It required soldiers who would walk into the wrong place at the wrong time and never understand why. This time it was 18 Marines. Young ones, most of them. Boys really the way Jason Cole had been a boy. They had orders that looked clean and official, signed by men they trusted, describing a routine movement through an area that intelligence swore was empty. They believed they were doing their jobs. They believed the flag on their shoulders meant that someone somewhere was looking out for them. They were wrong. The area was not empty. It had been prepared. Enemy fighters were already moving into position, dozens of them with heavy weapons and prepared firing points, and every advantage that a betrayed enemy could ask for. It was the same design, the same perfect trap, the same signature written in the same hand. 18 Marines were being sent to die so that Nathan Hayes could balance his ledger one more time. And by pure blind chance, the only person in the world who knew what that trap looked like, the only person who had seen it before and lived, the only person who could recognize the pattern for what it was a woman the Army called a traitor, hiding on a ridge with a rifle and a heart full of ghosts. Emily Carter did not know their names yet. She did not know that one of them had a newborn daughter he had never held. She did not know that one of them had lied about his age to enlist, or that one of them prayed every morning in a language his sergeant did not recognize, or that one of them carried a letter from a girl back home that he read so many times the paper had gone soft. She only knew that something was wrong. She was in position that morning by habit more than plan, scanning the horizon the way she always did when she saw the dust rising in the distance. A convoy. American vehicles moving with the loose confidence of men who believed they were safe. She counted them through her scope, and a cold feeling started in her chest, a feeling she knew too well. The area was supposed to be empty. No American forces were scheduled to operate there. She knew that because she made it her business to know things like that, to track movements, to understand the board she was playing on. There was no reason for a convoy to be here, unless someone had sent them here on purpose. She swept her scope across the ridge lines, across the buildings, across the shadows where shadows should not be. And there they were. The same shapes, the same positions, the same patient waiting geometry of an ambush already built and ready to close. She counted the enemy fighters and the number climbed and climbed, and her stomach turned to ice. 40, maybe more. Heavy weapons, rocket teams, machine gun positions covering every angle of escape. It was not a fight the Marines were driving into. It was an execution. They just did not know it yet. For a long, frozen moment, Emily Carter did not move. She knew this feeling. She had lived this feeling. She had stood on a ridge exactly like this one 18 months ago and watched men she loved drive into a trap, and a voice on the radio had told her to hold, and she had held, and they had died. Her hands were steady on the rifle now, but inside everything was shaking. because she understood with a clarity that took her breath away exactly what she was looking at. This was not a coincidence. This was Hayes. This was his work, his design, his signature. And these Marines were about to become the next 6 names, the next 12 names, the next 18 names in a ledger that would never stop growing as long as that man was free. She also understood what it would cost her to do anything about it. If she fired, she revealed her position. The enemy would know she was there. Worse, Hayes would know she was there. 18 months of hiding, of surviving, of building her case in the shadows, all of it would be over the instant she pulled the trigger. Her one chance to expose him, to clear the names of the 6 men she had already lost, would vanish in a single burst of gunfire. The logical choice was obvious. It was so obvious, it was almost cruel. Stay hidden. Protect the mission. Protect the truth. Let the tragedy play out below, terrible as it was, because saving these strangers meant sacrificing the only thing that could bring justice to the men already dead. 18 Marines she had never met weighed against 6 soldiers she had failed, and a truth the whole world needed to hear. Any strategist would have told her the answer. Any commander would have ordered her to hold. Nathan Hayes himself would have expected nothing less, because Nathan Hayes believed that everyone in the end chose survival. Emily lowered her eye to the scope. She could see them now, individual figures moving in the convoy. A young Marine leaning out of a vehicle, laughing at something his whole life still ahead of him. Another checking his gear with the nervous care of someone on his first deployment. She could see their faces, and their faces were young, and their faces reminded her of Jason Cole asking her in the dark whether he was a coward. "I think you're the bravest one here." She thought about her father dying in a hospital bed, telling her what a real soldier owed the people who trusted them. She thought about the smile on Nathan Hayes' face in that corridor. "You should have fired when I told you not to." And she thought about the promise she had made alone on 100 silent nights, whispered to 6 graves she could not visit. Her breathing slowed. The shaking inside her went still. The 2 halves of her, the strategist and the soldier, the survivor and the daughter, came together into a single unbreakable point. The right thing and the survivable thing are not always the same. "I couldn't save my team," she whispered, and her voice did not tremble at all. "But I won't let anyone else die, not today, not while I'm still breathing." Down below, an enemy fighter shifted his rocket launcher onto his shoulder, sighting in on the lead vehicle, his finger moving toward the trigger, 1 heartbeat away from starting the massacre. Emily Carter settled her crosshairs on him, and she made her choice. The rocket launcher never fired. Emily's first shot crossed more than 1,000 meters of empty air and found the man before his finger could close on the trigger. He dropped where he stood, the launcher tumbling from his shoulder, and for one strange, suspended moment, nothing else happened. The convoy kept rolling, the Marines kept laughing, the enemy kept waiting, and Emily Carter, alone on her ridge, worked the bolt of her rifle and understood that she had just ended 18 months of hiding with a single squeeze of her finger. There was no going back now. Down in the lead vehicle, a young corporal named Danny Ruiz was in the middle of telling a story about his sister's wedding when the man who had been about to kill him fell over in the distance for no reason he could see. He did not even notice. He kept talking. It would be the last easy moment any of them had for a very long time. Then the desert came apart. The enemy commander, seeing one of his rocket teams go down, made the only decision he could. He could not understand what had happened, but he understood that his ambush had been touched, and a touched ambush is a spent ambush. So he sprang it early before the convoy was fully inside the killing box, and that single premature order was the first small mercy in a morning that would have almost none. The first real explosion tore into the road just ahead of the lead vehicle instead of underneath it. Danny Ruiz stopped talking. The driver swore and wrenched the wheel. And then the whole world was noise. Gunfire came from everywhere at once. From the rooftops, from the alleys, from the low walls, and the burned-out shells of buildings. 40 men, maybe more, opening up on 18 who had believed they were driving through an empty stretch of nowhere. The Marines did what Marines are trained to do. They stopped. They dismounted. They found cover. But there was not enough cover, and there were not enough of them. And within the first 30 seconds, every one of them understood that they had driven into something that was designed to kill them all. Staff Sergeant Ray Buckley had 11 years in the Corps, and he had never felt fear like this. Not because of the volume of fire, though the volume was staggering. It was because of the geometry of it. He could read a fight. He could feel the shape of one. And this fight had a shape that meant they were already dead. They were surrounded. They were outnumbered. They were outgunned. The enemy held every high position and every angle of retreat. "Buckley!" one of his Marines screamed over the noise. "Buckley, where do we go?" And Ray Buckley, for the first time in his career, had no answer. That was the moment the impossible started. An enemy machine gunner dug into a second-story window with a perfect field of fire down onto the pinned Marines, suddenly stopped shooting. He did not reload. He did not reposition. He simply died and his weapon fell silent, and none of the Marines below understood why. Ray Buckley understood only that a gun that should have been cutting his men to pieces had gone quiet. Move, left side, move now, go, go, go. They moved. They did not know they were moving because someone 1,000 meters away had cleared a path for them. On the ridge, Emily Carter was no longer thinking. Thinking was too slow for this. She had passed into the place her father used to talk about, the place beyond fear and beyond calculation, where a soldier simply becomes the thing they were trained to be. Her breathing was slow. Her heartbeat was slow. Her hands were parts of the rifle now, and the rifle was part of her, and every few seconds, another man who was trying to kill those Marines stopped being a threat. She talked to herself as she worked. It was an old habit, a way to stay calm. Machine gun second floor gone. Rocket team the alley not today. Runner moving to flank, no you don't. Each shot was a decision. Each decision was a life. She could not save them by killing 40 men because she could not kill 40 men before they killed 18 Marines. So she did not try to kill everyone. She tried to kill the right ones in the right order at the right moment. The gunner about to fire. The rocket man about to launch. The fighter about to round the corner where 3 Marines were trapped and blind. She was not fighting the whole enemy force. She was fighting time itself, buying seconds and spending bullets to buy them. Down below, Ray Buckley was starting to understand that something was protecting his men, and the understanding terrified him almost as much as it saved him. He watched an enemy fighter rise up over a wall with a clear shot at one of his youngest Marines, a 19-year-old named Kyle Foster, who was frozen behind a wheel, well too scared to move. Buckley opened his mouth to shout a warning he knew would be too late, and the enemy fighter's head snapped back and he dropped. Buckley had not fired. None of his Marines had fired. The shot had come from somewhere else, somewhere far away, somewhere behind the enemy's own positions. "Angel," someone said. Buckley did not know who. One of the Marines, his voice cracking. "We got an angel. Somebody's up there. Somebody's shooting for us." Ray Buckley did not believe in angels, but he believed in what he was seeing, and what he was seeing was that every time one of his men was about to die, someone he could not see reached out from the distance and stopped it. "I don't care who it is," Buckley shouted. "Foster, get up, get up. Somebody's watching your back, but they can't do it if you're just kneeling there waiting to die. On me, on me." Kyle Foster got up. He did not know why the man who had been about to kill him was now lying dead. He only knew that his sergeant was screaming his name and that he did not want to die kneeling. He ran. 2,000 meters away, Emily Carter tracked him through her scope until he reached cover, and then she moved on to the next threat and the next and the next. 14 minutes into the ambush, the enemy commander realized his problem was not on the ground. He was not a stupid man. He had run operations like this many times. He knew the difference between panicked defenders getting lucky and something else. His men were not getting killed by the Marines. His men were getting killed from behind, from the flanks, from angles the Marines could not possibly be shooting from. His best positions, the ones he had spent hours preparing, were being erased by an enemy he could not locate. There was a sniper, a single sniper somewhere out beyond his lines, dismantling his ambush one man at a time. The enemy commander did the math, and the math frightened him. Whoever this was, they were not spraying. They were not lucky. Every shot counted. Every shot took a specific, valuable man. This was not a soldier. This was a surgeon. He got on his radio and he called for the one asset he had been told to keep in reserve for exactly this kind of situation. An asset that had cost a great deal of money. An asset that did not answer to him, but had been placed at his disposal by the same distant paymasters who had arranged this whole affair. He called for Victor Volkov. Far to the east, on a ridge even higher and more distant than Emily's, a man who had been watching the entire battle through a spotting scope, with something close to boredom, finally sat up. Victor Volkov had killed men on 4 continents. He had been the best in his unit, and then the best in his country, and then he had learned something about his country that had broken something inside him, and he had walked away and sold his skills to whoever paid. He told himself it did not matter anymore. He told himself the flag on a man's shoulder meant nothing, that loyalty was a story soldiers told each other to make the dying easier, that in the end there were only two kinds of people, the ones who pulled the trigger and the ones who caught the bullet. He had believed that for a long time. It had let him sleep. But now he was watching something that did not fit his story, and Victor Volkov was a man who could not stand a thing that did not fit. He had been told there would be a small distraction, a convoy of Americans walking into a trap to be wiped out cleanly to cover the movement of certain goods that Volkov neither knew nor cared about the nature of. He had been paid to be here in case something went wrong. Something had gone wrong, but it was not the kind of wrong he had expected. He watched the enemy positions dying, and he traced the angles backward the way only a master could, and slowly, patiently, he began to hunt for the shooter. "There you are," he murmured when at last he found the faint disturbance on the far ridge that others would never have seen. A shape that was not quite a shadow. A stillness that was too still. "Hello, my friend. You are very good. You are very, very good." He studied the shooter for a long moment, and what he saw made him frown because it did not fit. He had seen mercenaries shoot. They were efficient and cold, and they conserved themselves. He had seen soldiers under orders shoot. They followed patterns, doctrine, the logic of the mission. But this shooter was doing neither. This shooter was taking terrible risks. Every shot into the enemy's rear exposed the shooter's position a little more. A professional protecting an investment would have taken a few key shots and withdrawn. A soldier following orders would have obeyed the tactical picture. This shooter was staying. This shooter was spending their own safety recklessly, extravagantly, to protect a group of strangers who did not even know they existed. "Who fights like this?" Volkov whispered. "Who throws their own life away for men they will never meet?" He did not have an answer, and Victor Volkov had thought he had answers for everything. He settled behind his own rifle and began the slow, patient work of a counter-sniper. He would not rush. He never rushed. He would let the shooter keep firing, keep exposing themselves, and when the moment was perfect, he would end it. That was the game. That was the only game he still respected. The hunter had found the hunter, and Emily Carter did not know it yet. 22 minutes into the ambush, the Marines were still alive, and that fact was becoming its own kind of miracle. Ray Buckley had gotten his men consolidated behind a collapsed wall and the hulks of two vehicles. It was not good cover, but it was cover. And every man who reached it because their invisible angel had cleared the way. Buckley did a count in his head, dreading the number, and the number was 18. All 18. Wounded, some of them badly, but all 18 still breathing. He had never in his life been part of a fight where the ambushed force took no dead. It did not happen. It was not supposed to be possible. "Doc," he shouted. "Doc, how's Peterson?" "He's gonna make it if we get out of here," the corpsman shouted back, his hands red to the wrist. "Sergeant, we gotta move. We stay here, we die. This wall ain't gonna hold, and we're almost black on ammo." Buckley knew he was right. The angel could kill the men who tried to close on them, but the angel could not stop the mortars. He could hear the enemy setting up, and the angel could not manufacture bullets for Marines who were running dry. They had to break out, and breaking out meant crossing open ground toward the only gap in the encirclement, a gap that had appeared, Buckley slowly realized, because someone had been methodically killing every enemy fighter who tried to hold it. Their angel was not just saving them. Their angel was building them a door. "Everybody listen up," Buckley roared. "We are moving on my mark. East Gap, hard and fast. Do not stop for anything. Whoever's up there watching us has been kicking that door open for the last 10 minutes, and I am not going to insult him by dying in front of it. You hear me? We go together, we go now, and we make it count." "Ura," came the ragged answer. Frightened men, exhausted men, but Marines still. On her ridge, Emily saw them gathering to move and understood their plan instantly. She had been building that gap on purpose, praying they would see it and use it. Now she had to hold it open long enough for 18 men to cross ground that the enemy could rake with fire. She shifted her focus to the east. She would need to be faster now. Not surgical. Machine. She would need to kill anyone who so much as looked at that gap, and she would need to do it faster than she had ever done anything in her life. "Come on," she whispered to the Marines she could not speak to. "I've got the door. You just run. Run and don't look back. Run for me. Run for them. And that was the moment Victor Volkov fired. The bullet missed her head by less than the width of a hand. She felt it more than heard it, a violent tearing of the air, and the stone beside her exploded into fragments that stung her cheek. She rolled instantly, without thought, the pure reflex of a lifetime, and the second bullet struck exactly where she had been. For one cold, clarifying second, Emily Carter understood everything. There was another sniper. A good one, a very good one, because a lesser shooter would have hit her with the first round, and she would already be dead. She had been so focused on saving the Marines that she had stopped protecting herself, and someone out there had made her pay for it, and the only reason she was still alive was that she had moved a fraction of a second before he expected. She was pinned. If she rose to fire at the enemy in the gap, the other sniper would kill her. If she stayed down to survive, the other sniper, the Marines, would die crossing open ground with no one holding the door. Two problems, one of her, and she could only solve one at a time. Down below, Ray Buckley gave the order. Mark, go, go, go. 18 Marines broke from cover and ran for a gap that their angel could no longer protect. Emily heard nothing of it, but she felt the clock in her chest, the terrible awareness that the men she had chosen to save were now sprinting across the exact ground she had promised to keep clear, and she was lying flat behind a rock with a professional killer waiting to take her head off the instant she moved. She made a choice that no rational soldier would make. She rose up to protect the Marines. She knew it might kill her. She knew the other sniper was waiting for exactly this. But she had made a promise, whispered on 100 silent nights, and she had made it again that very morning. And Emily Carter was not a woman who broke promises to the dead or the living. I won't let anyone else die, she said, and she came up into her scope. Victor Volkov, 2,000 meters away, saw the shooter rise and his finger began to close on his trigger, and then something happened that had never happened to him in 20 years of war. He hesitated. He saw in that instant of magnification that the shooter was not covering their own escape. The shooter was not returning fire at him. The shooter had come up into the open, fully exposed, knowing he was there, and had turned their rifle away from him toward the enemy in the gap to protect the running Americans. The shooter had chosen the Marines over their own life, again, even now, even with a bullet already fired at their head. Volkov's fingers stopped. No, he breathed. No, this is not possible. You know I am here. You know I will kill you, and you turn away. You turn away to save them. In every calculation Victor Volkov had ever made about human beings, this did not compute. Men protected themselves. That was the first law, the only law, the one that survived when all the others died. Even the bravest men in the final instant chose their own breath over a stranger's. He had watched it 1,000 times. He had built his entire understanding of the world on it, and this shooter had just broken that law in front of him. While Volkov hesitated, Emily worked. She was not fast enough to save all of them, she knew that, so she was faster than she had ever been. An enemy gunner swung his weapon toward the running Marines. Gone. A fighter rose with a rocket. Gone. A three-man team tried to rush the gap. Gone, gone, gone. 4 seconds, 3 shots, and the door stayed open. One more moment, and one more, and one more. The Marines poured through. Kyle Foster, who had frozen. Danny Ruiz, who had been telling a story about his sister's wedding. The corpsman with Peterson slung over his shoulders. Ray Buckley, last always last, counting his men through the gap the way a shepherd counts a flock through a gate in a storm. 16, 17, 18. All 18 made it to the far side into the broken ground where the enemy could not easily follow, where vehicles were waiting to carry them out. And Ray Buckley threw one last look back toward the ridge where he knew his angel was, and he did the only thing he could do, which was raise his hand in a salute to a person he would never see. Emily saw it through her scope, a Marine filthy and bloody and alive saluting her across 2,000 meters of desert. And something cracked open in her chest that had been sealed shut for 18 months. Then Volkov's third bullet came. She had stayed up too long. She had given the Marines 1 second too many. And this time she did not move in time. The round struck her rifle. It was the strangest kind of luck, kind that is really just the mathematics of a battlefield playing out. The bullet meant for her skull instead struck the receiver of her weapon, and the rifle bucked and shattered in her hands, and fragments of steel and lead tore into her arm and her serenity, and the force of it threw her backward off her firing position and down the reverse slope of the ridge. She did not remember hitting the ground. She remembered the pain arriving a moment later, enormous and total. And she remembered thinking with a strange detachment that she had been shot, that her rifle was gone, that she was almost certainly going to die out here alone. And she remembered thinking underneath all of it that the Marines had made it, 18 of them, alive because of her. If this was where it ended, she thought it was not the worst place to end. She had failed 6. She had saved 18. The ledger was not balanced, would never be balanced, but it was better than it had been an hour ago. She lay in the dirt, and she waited to see if the other sniper would come and finish her, and she found that she was not afraid. Victor Volkov lowered his rifle and stared through his scope at the empty firing position where the shooter had been. He had hit the rifle. He had seen the weapon shatter, seen the shooter thrown backward and down. Perhaps the shooter was dead. Perhaps not. A part of him, the professional part, told him to reposition, to confirm the kill, to finish the contract. He did not move. He was thinking about the salute, not the shooter's actions, but the Marines. He had watched through his scope a filthy American sergeant turn and salute an empty ridge, a gesture of respect for someone he would never meet, someone who had spent their own life like water to save his. And he had watched the shooter wounded and falling hold their position one instant too long to give those men their door. Victor Volkov had walked away from his own flag a long time ago because he had decided that loyalty was a lie. He had watched his own people betray each other, sell each other, and he had concluded that there was no such thing as a soldier who kept faith. It had been the great disappointment of his life, and he had built his cynicism into armor and worn it into 100 fights. And now on a ridge in Syria, he had just watched loyalty with his own eyes. Real loyalty, the kind he had stopped believing in, the kind he had once long ago, before the betrayal, felt in his own chest. "Who are you?" he said quietly to the empty ridge. "What kind of soldier are you?" He should have gone to confirm the kill. It was the professional thing. It was what he was paid for. Instead, Victor Volkov packed up his rifle and he descended his ridge, and he began to move not away from the wounded shooter but toward them, and he could not have told anyone, least of all himself, exactly why. An hour later, Emily was still alive, though she was not entirely sure how. She had dragged herself into a crevice in the rocks, one arm, useless, her side on fire, and she had done what she could with the small medical kit she always carried. The bleeding had slowed. The pain had not. She had no rifle. She had no radio she trusted. She was wounded, exposed, and hunted, and somewhere out there was a sniper good enough to have nearly killed her. But her hands were steady as she worked, because her father had taught her that panic was a luxury a soldier could not afford, and because she had done harder things in the last 18 months than bleed alone in the rocks. She was thinking already past this moment. That was the discipline of her. The Marines were safe. That chapter was closed. But her position was blown now. Hayes would know. The moment those Marines reported that an unknown sniper had saved them, that report would climb the chain of command, and somewhere near the top of that chain was Nathan Hayes, and Nathan Hayes was a careful enough man to understand immediately what it meant. Someone was alive who should be dead. Someone was interfering. Someone knew. She had lit a fire that could not be put out. She had spent her cover, her secret, her one advantage, all in a single morning to save 18 men she had never met. She did not regret it, but she understood the cost, and with total clarity, and the maistos was enormous. She had perhaps 48 hours, she guessed, before Hayes moved to eliminate the threat she now represented. 48 hours before he tracked the shooting back to its source and sent everything he had. And in those 48 hours, she still needed to do the thing she had been trying and failing to do for a year and a half. She needed to find the final piece of evidence that would break him. She needed to reach a woman named Dr. Elena Volkov, a scientist the enemy was holding, who Emily's investigation had identified as the one person who could connect Hayes to the network he served, who could turn a pile of circumstantial fragments into a case no one could bury. Elena Volkov. The name had surfaced months ago in the threads Emily had been pulling. A researcher taken and held, whose knowledge was valuable enough that both sides wanted to control her. Emily had not been able to reach her. Now she had no choice but to try, wounded and rifeless and running out of time. She almost laughed at the impossibility of it. No support team, no official identity, no backup. A woman the Army called a traitor, shot and bleeding in enemy territory, was going to rescue a hostage scientist and take down a decorated major with international connections in 48 hours alone. "Okay, Dad," she whispered to the rocks. You said the right thing and the survivable thing aren't always the same. I heard you. I'm just gonna need you to explain the survivable part because I'm not seeing it. She heard the footstep before she saw the man. Instantly, her good hand went to the pistol at her hip, the only weapon she had left, and she brought it up as she twisted toward the sound, ignoring the scream of pain from her side, and she found herself pointing the barrel at the last person on earth she expected. He was standing at the mouth of the crevice, a big man weathered in gray, with the unmistakable stillness of a professional and a rifle slung on his back that he made no move to bring up. He had his hands slightly raised, open empty, and he was looking at her with an expression she could not read, something between curiosity and disbelief, in a strange, wary respect. You are the one, Victor Volkov said in accented English. The one on the ridge, the one who saved them. Emily's pistol did not waver. Her finger rested on the trigger. You're the one who shot me, she said. Yes. He did not deny it. He did not apologize. I am the one who shot you. My name is Victor Volkov. I have killed many people. Today I was paid to kill you. He tilted his head slightly. I did not. You shot my rifle out of my hands, Emily said. That looks a lot like trying. If I had wanted your head, Volkov said simply, you would have no head. I hit the rifle. He paused. I am very good. Emily believed him. That was the terrible part. She had felt the first 2 rounds pass close enough to know exactly how good he was, and she understood that if this man had wanted her dead, she would already be dead, which meant that he was standing in the mouth of her hiding place, unarmed in his hands, for some reason other than killing her, and she could not begin to guess what that reason was. Why are you here, she said. You had the shot. You could have finished it. Why walk down here and give me a chance to put a bullet in you? Volkov was quiet for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice had changed. Something in it had softened or maybe broken. Because I have been fighting for 20 years, he said, and I stopped believing in soldiers a long time ago. I believed there were only killers and the killed. I believed loyalty was a story. I believed no one would ever again do what I once thought soldiers did. His eyes did not leave hers. And then I watched you. I watched you turn your rifle away from me, knowing I was there, knowing I would fire to hold a door open for 18 men you have never met. I watched their sergeant salute an empty ridge. He shook his head slowly. I have not seen that in a very long time. I did not think I would ever see it again. Emily said nothing. Her pistol was still up, but something in her chest was listening. So I did not confirm the kill, Volkov said. I broke my contract. For the first time in many years, I did not do what I was paid to do, and I came down here to look at the person who made me remember something I had decided to forget. He almost smiled. And to see if you were still alive, because I would like very much to know what kind of soldier throws their life away for strangers. I did not think that soldier existed anymore. I thought perhaps I had imagined that such a thing was ever real. Emily studied his face, and every instinct she had, every hard lesson of 18 months alone, screamed at her that trusting anyone was a way to die. This man had shot her an hour ago. This man was a mercenary, a killer for hire on the payroll of the same network that had murdered her team. Everything in her training told her to keep the pistol up and end this before it became a threat. And yet, there was something in his eyes that she recognized because she had seen it in her own, in the polished steel of her rifle and the black surface of water at night. It was the look of a soldier who had loved something and been betrayed by it and had never stopped grieving. She had assumed she was the only one carrying that particular wound. She saw now that she was not. Volkov, she said slowly. Your name is Volkov. Yes. There's a scientist, Emily said, watching his face like a hawk. A woman being held by the people you work for. Dr. Elena Volkov. And she saw it. She saw the flinch, the flicker, the crack in the professional stillness. And she knew before he said a single word that she had found something she had not even been looking for. Victor Volkov's face, which had shown almost nothing through an entire battle, went white. What did you say? He whispered. Elena Volkov, Emily repeated. You know that name. For a long moment, the mercenary did not speak. When he did, his voice was barely audible, and it shook, and it was the voice of a man who has just heard news he has waited years to hear and dreaded to hear in equal measure. Elena, he said, is my daughter. And Emily Carter, wounded, rifleless, hunted, with 48 hours to save the world she had lost, lowered her pistol and understood that everything had just changed again. Your daughter, Emily repeated, and the pistol in her hand felt suddenly heavy and absurd, pointed at a man who had just told her the one thing that could turn everything upside down. The scientist they're holding is your daughter. Victor Volkov did not answer right away. He lowered himself slowly, carefully, until he was sitting across from her in the mouth of the crevice, a big, weathered man folding down like something breaking. And when he finally spoke, his voice had lost every trace of the professional killer she had faced an hour ago. "They told me she was dead," he said. 3 years ago. They told me my Elena was dead. And I believed them because, why would they lie? What use is a dead woman to anyone?" He laughed, and it was a terrible sound, with no humor in it at all. "And now you, a stranger, an American, a woman I tried to kill this morning, you sit here bleeding from my bullet, and you tell me she is alive. You tell me they have had her all this time." Emily lowered the pistol the rest of the way. Her instincts still screamed at her, but she had learned to listen past her instincts, and everything past her instincts told her this man was not lying. No one was that good an actor. The grief in him was too old and too deep to be performed. "I don't know if she's alive right now," Emily said, because she would not comfort him with a lie. "I know that 6 months ago she was. My information said the people holding her considered her too valuable to harm. Her research, whatever it is worth more to them than her death." Her research. Volkov closed his eyes. "She was always so much smarter than me. Chemistry, biology, things I never understood. I was a soldier, a simple thing, a rifle and a target. She was going to be something, she was going to matter." His eyes opened and they were wet. "And I let them tell me she was dead. I did not even look for her. I believed them, and I took their money and I went on killing for the very people who were holding my child." There it was. The thing Emily had recognized in his eyes on the ridge, not just betrayal, guilt, the particular poisonous guilt of a soldier who had trusted the wrong people and let his own be taken because of it. She knew that guilt. She had lived inside it for 18 months. "Volkov," she said, and something in her voice made him look up. "Listen to mine. I know exactly what you're feeling right now, because I've been drowning in it since the day my team died. You want to know the truth? I froze on a ridge, just like this one, 18 months ago. A man I trusted told me to hold my fire, and I held it, and 6 men I loved walked into a trap and died while I did nothing." Her voice did not break, but it cost her everything to keep it steady. "So don't sit there and tell me about the weight of believing the wrong people. I carry the same weight. I have carried it every single day." Volkov stared at her. "You froze," he said slowly, "and yet this morning you did not freeze. This morning you spent your own life like it was nothing. Because I already know what it feels like to freeze, and I would rather die than ever feel it again." For a long moment, the two of them sat in silence, 2 soldiers on opposite sides of a war, bound together by the same wound, and something passed between them that neither of them would have thought possible an hour before. "The man who lied to you," Emily said finally, "the man who told you Elena was dead, the man whose money you took. I need to know who he is, because I think it's the same network that killed my team. And I think if we pull hard enough on this thread, we can burn all of it down." Volkov was quiet, thinking, and then he said a name that made Emily's blood run cold. "There is a man," he said, "an American. He does not come himself, but his fingerprints are on everything. The shipments, the operations, the arrangements. The men I work for speak of him with respect and with fear. They call him the broker." He paused. "But once a man drank too much and used his real name. Hayes. Major Nathan Hayes." Emily's breath stopped in her chest. Of course it was Hayes. She had known his web was vast, had known he sold more than just her team. But to hear it confirmed, to hear that the same man who had smiled at her in that corridor had also lied to a father about his dead daughter and used that lie to buy a killer's loyalty, it was almost too much. The scope of his evil kept expanding, and every time she thought she had seen the bottom of it, the floor gave way to something deeper. "Nathan Hayes killed my team," Emily said, and her voice was very quiet and very certain. "Nathan Hayes sold your daughter and told you she was dead. Nathan Hayes sent those 18 Marines into that ambush this morning to cover another one of his shipments. Volkov, the man who ruined both our lives, is the same man. And I have spent 18 months building a case against him, and the last piece I need, the one piece that would break him for Good is a witness who can connect him to the network. She looked at him. The witness is your daughter. The transformation in Victor Volkov was immediate and complete. The grief was still there, but now something else rose up beneath it. Something Emily recognized because she had lived on it herself for a year and a half. Purpose. Cold, hard, absolute purpose. Where, he said. It was not a question. It was a demand. I have a location, Emily said. It's 6 months old, but it's the best I have. A facility about 40 kilometers north of here. Heavily guarded. I was never able to get close because I was one wounded woman with no support, no vehicle, and a rifle. She gestured at the shattered remains of her weapon, and now I don't even have the rifle. Volkov looked at her wounded arm, at her ruined weapon, at the blood on her side, and then he looked at the rifle slung across his own back, and something like a decision hardened in his face. You have no rifle, he said, but you have me, and I have a rifle, and I have a vehicle 2 kilometers from here, and I have spent 3 years serving the men who have my daughter, which means I know their patterns, their guards, their shifts, their weaknesses. He leaned forward. This morning I was the best counter sniper on this battlefield, and you were the best sniper, and we tried to kill each other. I think we would be far more dangerous, pointed the same direction. Emily studied him. Every rule of survival she had learned said that trusting a mercenary who had shot her that same morning was insane. But she also knew with the clarity that comes to soldiers in the moments that matter, that she could not do this alone. She never could have. And here delivered to her by the strangest turn of fate was a man with the skills she lacked, the access she lacked, and a reason to fight that was even more personal than her own. If we do this, she said, we do it my way. I've spent 18 months studying Hayes. I know how he thinks. I know how his people move. You know the ground and the guards. We put those together. We don't just rescue Elena. We get the evidence and we take Hayes down and we make sure that everyone he betrayed gets their names back. She held out her good hand. But I need to know I can trust you, Volkov, because the moment I turn my back on you, you could put a knife in it and I'd never see it coming. Victor Volkov looked at her outstretched hand, and then he did something that surprised her. He unslung his rifle, the weapon that had nearly killed her that morning, and he set it on the ground between them within her reach, closer to her than to him. There, he said, now you have 2 weapons and I have none. If I betray you, you kill me before I can move. I give you my rifle as I once gave my daughter my word. His voice roughened. I broke my words to her when I believed them and stopped looking. I will not break it again. You have my hand, Captain, and you have my rifle, and you have my life for whatever it is worth until my Elena is free. Emily took his hand, and in that moment the 2 loneliest soldiers in Syria stopped being alone. They moved within the hour. Emily's wounds slowed them, but not as much as Volkov feared. She had patched herself well enough to function, and she functioned in the way she did everything through sheer refusal to stop. They reached his vehicle, a battered truck hidden in a wadi, and as they drove north through the broken country, they planned 2 professionals laying out a problem and taking it apart piece by piece. The facility has 3 rings of security, Volkov said as he drove. The outer ring is local fighters poorly trained, but many. The middle ring is the professionals, the ones who guard the valuable things. The inner ring is the science wing, where they would keep someone like Elena. He glanced at her. I have been inside twice, delivering things, collecting payment. I know the layout, but I have never been in the science wing. I did not know why it was guarded so heavily. His jaw tightened. Now I know they were guarding my daughter. How many men total at the facility? Perhaps 60, perhaps more now after this morning. They will be nervous. An unknown sniper destroyed one of their operations. They will have increased their guard everywhere. Emily absorbed that. 60 men, 2 of them. It should have been impossible, and by every rule of warfare it was impossible. But she had learned that impossible was just a word people used when they had not thought hard enough. Then we don't fight 60 men, she said. We never fight 60 men. We fight 2 men here and 3 men there, and 1 man in the right place at the right time. We move like ghosts and we hit like lightning, and we're gone before they understand what happened. You've got the access to get us through the outer ring. I've got the skills to get us through the rest. And we do not fire a single shot we don't have to, because the moment they know we're inside, 60 men become one problem instead of 30 small ones. Volkov nodded slowly, a grim respect in his eyes. You think like they do, he said. like the network, like Hayes. I've spent 18 months learning to think like Hayes, Emily said. It's the only way I've survived. You want to bully a man like that, you have to be willing to go into the dark places he lives in. You just can't stay there. That's the whole trick. Go into the dark, do what has to be done, and come back out. Hayes went in and never came out. That's the difference between him and me. That's the only difference that matters. They drove on, and the facility grew closer, and both of them fell into the particular silence of soldiers before a fight, the silence where a person makes their peace with whatever is coming. Then Emily's small radio, the one she barely trusted, crackled to life. She had built it herself piece by piece over months, a receiver tuned to certain military frequencies she had learned to monitor. It rarely caught anything useful. But now faint and broken a voice came through, and the voice was giving orders, and the orders made Emily's blood freeze for the second time that day. It was an American voice. Cold, controlled, familiar. Confirm the anomaly at grid reference. Unknown shooter. I want it found and eliminated. No, you listen to me. This cannot be allowed to spread. Whoever interfered with that convoy is a threat to the entire operation. Find them and find the source. Emily knew that voice. She had heard it in her nightmares for 18 months. She had heard it on a ridge in Syria telling her to hold her fire while her team died. She had heard it in a corridor telling her she should have died with them. Hayes, she whispered. That's Hayes. He's here. He's not in some office in Washington. He's here in country running this himself. Volkov's hands tightened on the wheel. You are certain. I would know that voice anywhere, Emily said. And then slowly the meaning of it unfolded in front of her, and her heart began to pound. Volkov, do you understand what this means? He's here. He came here himself. He never does that. A man like Hayes stays behind 10 layers of protection. He never gets his own hands dirty, never puts himself in reach. She turned to look at him, which means this operation, whatever's moving through here right now, is big enough that he came in person to protect it. Big enough that he's out from behind his walls. Big enough that for the first time in 18 months, he's somewhere I can actually reach him. It is a chance, Volkov said carefully, but it is also a danger. If he is here, then his best people are here. I know. Emily's mind was racing now faster than the truck, laying out possibilities and discarding them, building the shape of something that had not existed a minute ago. We came here to rescue Elena and get her testimony. That was the plan, but if Hayes is here, we don't just get the witness. We get the man. We get the evidence and the criminal in the same place at the same time. She exhaled slowly. It's everything I've wanted for a year and a half, all in one place. And it's a trap so obvious that I'd have to be a fool to walk into it. Then what do we do? Emily was quiet for a long moment, and then she smiled, and it was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile of a woman who had spent 18 months as prey and had just realized she might finally get to be the hunter. We walk into it anyway, she said, but we walk in as the trap, not the mouse. They reached the outer edge of the facility's security zone as the light began to fade. Volkov's access got them through the first ring exactly as he had promised. The local fighters at the outer checkpoint knew his truck, knew his face, waved him through with the bored indifference of men who had seen him a dozen times. Emily lay hidden in the back under a tarp, her borrowed rifle beside her, and her pistol in her hand, listening to Volkov exchange a few words in a language she did not speak, listening to the truck roll forward into the belly of the enemy. It was, she thought, the single most vulnerable moment of her life. Wounded, hidden, unable to see, trusting her survival entirely to a man who had tried to kill her that morning. If Volkov chose to betray her, all he had to do was say one word to the guards and it would be over. He did not say the word. The truck rolled through and stopped, and after a few minutes, Volkov's voice came low through the tarp. We are inside the outer ring. I have parked in a storage area. There are no guards here now, but that will not last. We must move quickly. Are you able? I'm able, Emily said, and she came up out of the tarp, and the fight for Elena Volkov began. What followed was the deadliest kind of work, the kind Emily was best at, the kind that happened in silence and shadow and lasted only seconds at a time. They moved through the facility like the ghost she had promised they would be. A guard in a corridor taken down before he could cry out. A patrol of 2 avoided entirely by timing their movement to the gap between rounds. A locked door opened with the skills Volkov had learned in a lifetime of going places he was not supposed to go. 20 minutes in, they had penetrated the middle ring without firing a shot. 30 minutes in, they reached the edge of the science wing, and Emily's radio crackled again, and Hayes's voice came through closer, now clearer. I don't care about the cost. Move the material tonight. Yes, all of it. And the woman, Emily and Volkov froze together at those last words. The woman, Volkov breathed. Elena. He is talking about Elena. She's a liability now. If there's an active threat in the area, we can't risk her being taken. You know what to do. Make it clean. Emily felt Volkov go rigid beside her, felt the rage rise off him like heat, and she grabbed his arm before he could move. No, she whispered fiercely. No, you move, now you get us both killed, and Elena dies anyway. You hear me? Look at me, Volkov. Look at me. He looked at her and his eyes were wild. He just ordered them to kill my daughter, he said. He ordered them to kill her tonight, Emily said. Not this second, tonight. Which means we have time, but not much, and if we waste it on rage, she dies. So you are going to breathe, and you are going to lock it down, and you are going to be the soldier your daughter needs right now, instead of the father who wants revenge. Can you do that? She tightened her grip. Can you do that, Victor? It was the first time she had used his first name. It seemed to reach him. Slowly, terribly, he mastered himself the way a man masters a scream, and the wildness in his eyes cooled into something colder and far more dangerous. Yes, he said, I can do that. Good. Then let's go get your daughter. They moved into the science wing. The inner ring was different from the rest. Cleaner, quieter, guarded not by fighters but by professionals. The ones Volkov had warned her about, men who move with discipline and watch with real attention. There would be no slipping past these. Emily studied them, counted them, mapped their positions, and understood that here at last they would have to fight. 4 guards on this level, she whispered. 2 at the far door, 2 roving. The far door is her. Has to be. It's the only thing worth guarding like that. She checked her borrowed rifle, checked her pistol. We take the rovers first quiet, then the 2 at the door before they can raise an alarm. It has to be fast. If even one of them keys a radio, this whole place comes down on us. And if we are not fast enough, then we find out how good we really are, Emily said. You take the rover on the left, I take the one on the right. On my mark. They waited. Emily counted the rover's steps, learned their rhythm, felt the moment approaching the way she felt everything in her breathing and her bones. And when the 2 roving guards reached the point in their patrol where their backs were turned and their attention was elsewhere, she breathed the word. Mark. It happened in seconds. 2 guards down silently before either understood he was in danger. But the 2 at the door saw, and one of them reached for his radio, and Emily's world narrowed to that single hand and that single device, and she knew with absolute certainty that if that hand closed on that radio, Elena Volkov would die, and so would they. She was already moving, she was already firing. Her borrowed rifle came up and barked once, and the guard reaching for the radio dropped the device, falling from his dead fingers, and the last guard raised his weapon toward her, and Volkov's rifle spoke from beside her, and then the corridor was silent again. 4 guards, 4 seconds, no alarm. Emily let out a breath she had not known she was holding. Clear, she whispered. Go the door. They reached the far door together. It was locked, heavy, secure. Volkov went to work on it while Emily covered the corridor, her heart hammering, knowing that at any second more guards could appear, knowing that they were now committed, that there was no more sneaking, that from this moment on, it was speed or death. The lock gave, the door opened. And there in the room beyond, thin and pale and worn down by 3 years of captivity, but unmistakably gloriously alive, was a woman who looked up at the opening door with terror in her eyes, terror that turned to confusion. And then as she saw the big weathered man in the doorway, to something that broke Emily's heart to witness. Papa, Elena Volkov whispered. Papa, is that you? They told me. They said you knew I was here and you didn't come. They said you didn't care. They said you took their money and left me here to die. And Victor Volkov, the killer of 4 continents, the man who had nearly ended Emily's life that morning, fell to his knees in front of his daughter and wept. They lied to me, he said, his voice shattering. They told me you were dead, Elena. 3 years they told me you were dead. If I had known for one single day that you were alive, I would have torn this whole country apart to reach you. I swear it. I swear it on your mother's grave. They lied to us both. Emily stood in the doorway watching a father and daughter reunited across 3 years of lies, and for one moment she let herself feel it, let herself remember 6 men she could not bring back, let herself understand that this reunion, this one family made whole again, was something Hayes had tried to steal and failed. It was a small victory in a vast darkness, but it was real. Then her radio crackled one final time, and Hayes's voice came through, and this time it was not giving orders to some distant subordinate. This time it was close, very close. Close enough that Emily heard it twice, once through the radio, and once faintly echoing down the corridor from somewhere nearby. Report on the anomaly. I want a full sweep of this facility. Something feels wrong. He was in the building. Nathan Hayes was in the building, walking its corridors, and the man Emily had hunted for 18 months was right now closer to her than he had been since the day he destroyed her life. She keyed her mind to cold and looked at the father and daughter on the floor. Volkov, she said quietly, we have to move, now. Elena, can you walk? I can walk, Elena said, and she wiped her father's tears from his face with a tenderness that did not belong in this place. I can do more than walk. You said you have been building a case against them, against the broker, against Hayes. Her eyes sharpened, and Emily saw in them the intelligence Volkov had spoken of, the mind that had made her valuable enough to keep alive for 3 years. I have been in this facility for 3 years. I have seen everything. The shipments, the names, the transfers. They talked freely in front of me because they were certain I would never leave here alive. She stood unsteady but determined. I do not just have testimony. I have memorized everything. Every date, every name, every crime. I am the case. Emily stared at her, and hope, real hope, the kind she had not let herself feel in 18 months, rose in her chest so sharply it almost hurt. Then we get you out of here, she said. We get you out of here, and in front of the right people, and Nathan Hayes goes down for everything he's ever done, and 6 soldiers get their names back, and 18 Marines find out who saved them, and a father gets his daughter, and all of it, everything becomes worth it. She turned toward the door, toward the corridor, toward the sound of the man she had hunted across a 1.5 years of exile. But first, she said, we have to get past Nathan Hayes, and he's between us and the way out. Getting past Nathan Hayes meant getting past the men Nathan Hayes had brought with him, and those men were already moving. Emily heard it before she saw it, the change in the rhythm of the facility, the sound of boots moving with purpose instead of routine. The sweep Hayes had ordered was beginning, and it was beginning here on this level in the science wing because some instinct in him had told him that whatever was wrong in his operation was wrong right here. They're coming, she said. Full sweep. We've got maybe 2 minutes before they reach this corridor. Volkov is there another way out of this wing. Volkov was on his feet now. The father folded away the soldier back in his place. One, he said. A service corridor at the far end. It leads to the loading area where they move the shipments. But it will be guarded, and it is the direction they are moving the material tonight, which means Hayes will be near it. Of course it is, Emily said. The only way out is straight through him. She looked at Elena. How strong are you really? Not what you wish you were, what you are. Elena's jaw set. I have survived 3 years of these people telling me I was already dead, she said. I will not fall down now that my father has come. Point me where to go. I will get there. Emily believed her. There was something in this family, some refusal to break, that she recognized from her own bones. They moved. The service corridor was exactly where Volkov said it would be, and it was exactly as guarded as he had feared. 2 men at the entrance, professionals alert. But Emily and Volkov had become something in the last hours that neither had been alone. A single weapon with 2 barrels, and the 2 guards went down before they could sound an alarm, and the 3 of them slipped into the narrow service passage as the sweep teams poured into the corridor they had just left. They could hear the search behind them, shouts as the guards found the bodies, the alarm finally going up. But by then, Emily, Volkov, and Elena were deep in the service corridor, moving fast toward the loading area, toward the way out, toward the man at the center of everything. And then the corridor opened up, and they were there, and so was he. Nathan Hayes stood in the loading area surrounded by crates of the material he had come in person to move, flanked by 4 of his best men, giving orders into a radio. He was older than Emily remembered Greer, but it was him, unmistakably him, the man who had smiled at her in a corridor and told her she should have died with her team. For one frozen instant across the width of the loading area, Nathan Hayes turned and saw a woman he believed had been erased 18 months ago, and his face did something Emily had waited a year and a half to see. It showed fear. "Carter," he breathed. And then louder to his men, "That's her. That's the shooter. That's the one who's been interfering. Kill her. Kill all of them." The loading area erupted. Emily was already moving, already firing, already dragging Elena behind the cover of a crate as Volkov's rifle answered from her side. Hayes's 4 men were good, but Emily and Volkov were better, and they had the advantage of desperation and the disadvantage of a civilian to protect. And the fight became a thing of seconds and inches and split decisions. One of Hayes's men fell to Volkov, another to Emily. But the remaining 2 were smart, and they split, and one of them got an angle on Elena's position, and Emily had to throw herself across the gap to cover the scientist. And she took a round through the same arm the rifle fragment had torn that morning, and the pain nearly took her under. "Emily," Volkov shouted. I'm up, keep firing," she gasped, and she was somehow still firing, one arm barely working, and she put the man who had shot her down with 2 rounds center mass. That left one of Hayes's men and Hayes himself, and in the chaos, Emily looked up and saw the thing she had dreaded. Hayes was running, not fighting, running toward a door at the far end of the loading area, abandoning his men, abandoning his shipment, doing what men like Hayes always did in the end, which was save themselves. "He's running," Emily shouted. "Volkov, the last man is yours. Hayes is mine." She went after him. She should not have been able to. She was wounded in both arms, now bleeding, exhausted past the point most people would have collapsed. But she had been chasing this man for 18 months through exile and starvation and loneliness and grief, and there was not a force on earth that could have stopped her from following him through that door. She caught him in the corridor beyond, tackled him from behind, and the 2 of them went down together. And Nathan Hayes, decorated major betrayer of 6 soldiers, seller of his own people, found himself on the ground with a wounded woman's pistol pressed against his skull. "Don't move," Emily said. Her voice was shaking, not with fear, but with the sheer weight of the moment. "Don't you move, Nathan. After everything, after all of it, don't you dare give me a reason to make this easy." Hayes went still. And then, because he was who he was, he began to talk. "Carter," he said, and even now, even with a gun to his head, there was a smoothness to him, a confidence that 18 months of hunting had not prepared her for. "Let's be reasonable. Let's be smart. You're a smart woman. You've always been a smart woman. That's why I chose you back then. You were the only one sharp enough to be a threat, so you were the only one worth removing." "You destroyed my life," Emily said. "You killed 6 men, Daniel Reed, Thomas Walker, Kevin Miller, Jason Cole, Marcus Hill, Anthony Cruz. You sold them like they were cargo. You told a father his daughter was dead. You sent 18 Marines into a trap this morning to cover a shipment, and you think you're going to talk your way out of this. I think," Hayes said carefully, "that you have a gun to my head and you haven't pulled the trigger, which tells me you're not a murderer. It tells me you want something more than my death. You want your name back. You want the truth out. And here's the thing, Carter. Here's the thing you need to understand." He turned his head slightly, just enough to catch her eye. "You can't have that if you kill me. A dead man can't confess. A dead man is just a dead man, and you're still a traitor. But a live man in the right room in front of the right people, that's your redemption. So you need me alive far more than you want me dead." And the terrible thing, the thing that made Emily's hand tremble on the pistol, was that he was right. She wanted to kill him. God, she wanted to. Every cell in her body screamed for it. 18 months of grief and rage and loneliness demanded it. 6 men whose faces she would never forget demanded it. And Nathan Hayes lay under her gun and dared her to do it because he knew that his death would leave her exactly where she started. "You always were smart," Emily said quietly. "Right up until the end. You think you understand me. You think because I froze once 18 months ago that I'm the kind of person who takes the easy way." She leaned down close to his ear. "But I learned something out there in the desert, Nathan. I learned it the hard way alone, with nothing but ghosts for company. The right thing and the survivable thing aren't always the same, and neither are the right thing and the satisfying thing." She pressed the pistol harder against his skull. "Killing you would be satisfying, but it wouldn't be right, and it wouldn't clear their names. So you're going to live, Nathan. You're going to live, and you're going to stand in front of the world, and you're going to answer for every single thing you've done. For the first time, real fear entered Nathan Hayes' eyes because he understood that she meant it, that she was not going to give him the clean death he had been maneuvering toward, that she was going to do something far worse to a man like him. She was going to expose him. "You'll never make it out of here," Hayes said, and the smoothness was gone now, replaced by something desperate. "This facility is crawling with my men. You have a wounded scientist and a mercenary who'll turn on you the second it suits him. You'll be dead before you reach the perimeter." "Maybe," Emily said, "but I won't be dead alone." And that was when the radio on Hayes' belt crackled, and a voice came through, and the voice changed everything for the third time that day. "This is Colonel David Reeves, United States Army, to all forces in the vicinity. We have this facility surrounded. Stand down. I repeat, stand down. Major Nathan Hayes, if you can hear this, it's over. We know everything. Captain Carter, if you can hear this, hold on. Help is coming." Emily's breath caught. Reeves, Colonel David Reeves, the one officer who had never believed she was a traitor. The one man in the entire chain of command who had looked at the evidence against her and seen the holes in it, who had quietly, at great risk to his own career, kept digging when everyone else had closed the file. She had reached out to him once months ago through channels so careful and so buried that she had never been sure the message got through. She had sent him fragments of what she had found, breadcrumbs, hoping that someone with the authority she lacked might follow them. She had never known if he received them. She had never known if he believed them. He had, and he had followed them all the way here. "You hear that, Nathan?" Emily said. And now it was her turn to lean close, her turn to let him feel what she had felt for 18 months. "That's the sound of your whole world ending. That's the sound of every lie you told coming apart. Colonel Reeves believed me when no one else would, and he's been building his own case while I've been building mine. And now he's here, and he's got the facility surrounded, and there's nowhere left for you to run." She smiled, and it was not cruel, but it was final. "You spent 18 months thinking I was a ghost you could ignore. You should have made sure I was really dead." Hayes said nothing. There was nothing left to say. The next hour was chaos of a different kind. Reeves's forces moved into the facility, and Hayes's men, seeing their paymaster captured and their positions surrounded, did what mercenaries and opportunists always do when the money stops making sense. They surrendered or they ran, and the fight went out of the place like air from a punctured lung. Emily brought Nathan Hayes out in handcuffs, marching him through his own facility, past the crates of the material he had sold his soul for, and she handed him personally to Colonel David Reeves, who took one look at her wounds, at the exhaustion and grief and fierce triumph in her face, and did something that broke 18 months of loneliness in a single gesture. He saluted her. "Captain Carter," Reeves said, "I'm sorry it took so long. I'm sorry you had to do this alone. But I never stopped believing you. Not for one day." His voice roughened. "Welcome back, soldier." Emily could not speak. She returned the salute, and it was the first time in a year and a half that anyone had treated her as what she was, instead of what Hayes had made her out to be, and something inside her that had been clenched tight for 18 months finally slowly began to unclench. But she was not finished, not yet. "Colonel," she said, "the scientist, Dr. Elena Volkov. She's the key to everything. Hayes and the network held her for 3 years. She's memorized all of it, every shipment, every name, every crime. She's the witness that makes the whole case. And her father," she gestured to Victor Volkov, who stood a short distance away, his arm around his daughter, watching the soldiers around him with the wariness of a man who had been on the other side of them for years. "Her father is the reason we got in. He turned on the network to save her. Whatever happens next, he did that. Remember it." Reeves looked at Volkov, at the mercenary who had spent years serving the enemy, and Emily saw the calculation in his eyes, the awareness of what a man like Volkov had done and who he had done it for. But she also saw Reeves take in the way Volkov held his daughter, and the exhaustion and grief in the big man's face, and something in the colonel softened. "We'll sort out Mr. Volkov's situation," Reeves said carefully, "but I'll note for the record that he cooperated and that his cooperation was essential. That counts for something. It counts for a lot, actually." Volkov met Emily's eyes across the loading area, and he inclined his head slightly, a soldier's acknowledgement, and Emily understood that whatever came next for him, he had gotten the one thing he came for. His daughter was free. The rest was noise. They found the evidence that night, all of it. Elena walked the investigators through everything, her memory as sharp as Volkov had promised, connecting Hayes to the network to the shipments to a trail of betrayed operations and murdered soldiers that stretched back years. Emily's own case, the fragments she had gathered over 18 months of exile, slotted into Elena's testimony like the missing pieces of a puzzle, and together they formed something that no one could bury, no one could alter, no one could explain away. The comms logs from the Syria mission, the ones that had been altered to frame Emily, were recovered in their original form from the network's own records. Hayes had kept them the way men like him always keep evidence of their power as insurance's trophies. And in their original form, they showed exactly what Emily had always said. They showed Major Nathan Hayes ordering Captain Emily Carter to hold her fire while an ambush he had arranged destroyed her team. 18 months of being called a traitor. 18 months of exile and grief and loneliness. And the truth had been sitting in Nathan Hayes' own files the entire time. Emily sat with those logs for a long time that night, alone, reading the record of the worst day of her life, laid out in cold official language. Her warnings, Hayes' orders, the exact moment she had frozen, the moment that had haunted her, now revealed for what it truly was: not a failure of courage, but the tragic obedience of a soldier trusting a chain of command that had been poisoned at the top. She had not killed her team. She had been ordered to stand by while they were killed. There was a difference, and for 18 months she had not been able to see. It had blamed herself for the freeze, had carried a guilt that was never hers to carry. She wept alone reading those logs, not the sharp grief of loss, but something deeper and older. Finally releasing 18 months of self-blame, draining out of her, leaving behind something quieter and more bearable. "It wasn't my fault," she whispered to the empty room to 6 men who could not hear her. "I tried to warn you. I tried. It wasn't my fault." And for the first time, she almost believed it. Colonel Reeves found her there later, and he sat with her, and he did not try to fill the silence with comfort. He was a soldier. He knew that some silences should not be filled. "You know what happens now," he said finally. "Hayes goes to trial," Emily said. "Hayes goes to trial, and it won't be quiet. A decorated major selling out American units connected to an international network, the whole thing. It's going to be one of the biggest cases the military's seen in a generation." Reeves paused. "And you're going to be at the center of it. The traitor who turned out to be the hero. The ghost who came back. They're going to want you to testify. They're going to put your face on things. It's going to be a circus, Emily, and you've been alone in the dark for 18 months. I need to know you're ready for that." Emily was quiet for a long moment. "I don't care about being at the center of anything," she said. "I don't care about my face on things. I never did this for that." She looked at him. "I did it for them. For Reed and Walker and Miller and Cole and Hill and Cruz. So their names get cleared. So their families know they didn't die because of anything they did wrong. So the world knows they were betrayed, not defeated." Her voice caught. "That's all I want, Colonel. I want their names back. Mine can come along for the ride if it has to." Reeves looked at her with something that was very close to reverence. "Their names will be cleared," he said. "I'll make sure of it personally. Every one of them, and their families will know the truth. You have my word." There was one more thing Emily needed to know, and she almost did not ask because she was afraid of the answer. "The Marines," she said, "this morning. The 18 Marines. Did they all make it? I saw them reach the vehicles, but I was hit. I didn't see if they got out clean." "Did they make it, Colonel, all of them?" Reeves smiled, and it was the first fully warm smile she had seen on his face. "All 18, he said. Not one casualty. It's already a legend, Emily. 18 Marines walked into a 40-man ambush and walked out without a single loss, and every one of them is telling anyone who'll listen that an angel on a ridge saved their lives. A guardian they never saw. A sniper who fought for them for no reason anyone can figure out." He looked at her. "They don't know it was you. They don't know your name, but they know someone chose to save them at terrible cost. And Emily, those men will spend the rest of their lives grateful to a stranger they'll never be able to thank." Emily closed her eyes. 18 men alive. Because on a ridge in the Syrian desert, a woman the world called a traitor had remembered her father's words and made a choice. "I couldn't save my team, but I won't let anyone else die." She had kept that promise. She had kept it against a 40-man ambush and a master counter sniper and every rule of survival that said she should have stayed hidden and let them die. She had spent her cover, her secret, her one advantage, Her blood, all of it, to keep that promise. And it had led her here, to Hayes in handcuffs, to Elena free, to 6 names about to be cleared, to the truth finally coming out. The choice that should have destroyed her had saved everything. "There's one more thing," Reeves said, standing. "Volkov, the father, he's asking to see you before we process him. I told him it wasn't standard procedure. He said he didn't care about procedure, that he owed you a debt he could never repay, and that he wouldn't leave until he'd said so to your face." Reeves raised an eyebrow. "That's a dangerous man, Emily, a mercenary. He's got a long ledger of his own to answer for. But he risked everything to help you tonight, and he did it for the right reasons. And I've seen enough in 30 years to know the difference between a bad man and a good man who did bad things for bad reasons." He paused at the door. "I'll let you decide if you want to see him." "I'll see him," Emily said without hesitation. Victor Volkov was waiting where they had told him to wait, his daughter beside him, and when Emily came in, the big weathered man rose to his feet and stood before her, and for a moment neither of them knew what to say. They had tried to kill each other that morning. They had saved each other's lives by nightfall. There was no script for that. "They tell me I will have to answer for the things I have done," Volkov said finally. "The years I served them, the men I killed for money. I am not asking you to speak for me. I did those things. I will answer for them." He looked at Elena and his eyes softened in a way Emily was starting to understand was the truest thing about him. "But whatever they do to me now, it does not matter. Because my daughter is alive and she is free and she is here and I got to hold her again. 3 years I believed she was dead. And you gave her back to me." His voice broke. "You gave her back to me, Emily Carter. I do not have the words. In any language, I do not have the words for what that is worth." Emily looked at this man, this killer, this father, this soldier who had been broken by betrayal, exactly as she had been and who had found his way back to something like faith by nightfall, and she understood that whatever he had been, he was not that thing anymore. "You didn't just help me rescue her," Emily said. "You gave me your rifle when you had every reason to keep it. You turned on the people who owned you. You chose the right thing when the survivable thing was to stay bought." She stepped forward and put her hand on his shoulder. "Whatever you were before tonight, Victor, that's not who you are anymore. And I'll tell that to anyone who asks. I'll tell it at your hearing. I'll tell it to Reeves. I'll tell it to God if he asks. You came back. That's the only thing that matters. You came back." Volkov could not speak. He took her hand from his shoulder and held it in both of his, and he bowed his head over it, and Elena came and stood beside her father. And the 3 of them stayed like that for a long moment, 3 people who had been alone and were somehow no longer. "Some debts cannot be paid, Ost," Volkov said finally, his voice thick. "This is one of them. I will carry it for the rest of my life. And if you ever need me for anything in any corner of this world, you will call and I will come. That is not a promise. Promises can be broken. This is a fact like the sun. You saved my daughter. I belong to that debt now, and I will not run from it." Emily thought of another thing her father had said long ago in a hospital bed when she was too young to understand. "The hardest part is knowing what you owe people and paying it, even when nobody's watching, especially when nobody's watching." She understood it now. She understood all of it now. "You don't owe me anything, Victor," she said gently. "You already paid it. The moment you laid your rifle on the ground between us. The moment you chose to come back." She squeezed his hand. "Go be with your daughter. Whatever comes next, face it together. That's the only thing that ever really matters. Not the medals, not the names in the records. The people who trust you and staying with them when everyone else walks away." She smiled and there were tears in her eyes. "My father taught me that. A real soldier never abandons the people who trust them. You didn't abandon Elena, not really. The moment you knew the truth, you came for her. That's who you are. Hold on to that." Outside, the sun was beginning to rise over the Syrian desert. The same desert where 24 hours earlier, Emily Carter had made a choice that everyone said would destroy her. The light came up slow and gold over the broken country, and somewhere out there, 18 Marines were alive who should have been dead, and a father held a daughter he had believed was lost, and a man who had ruined so many lives was in handcuffs awaiting justice. And 6 soldiers were about to have their names returned to them, their honor restored, their sacrifice finally understood. Emily Carter stood in that rising light, wounded and exhausted, and more at peace than she had been in 18 months, and she thought about the long road still ahead. The trial, the testimony, the circus Reeves had warned her about. And after that, whatever came after that, a life she had not let herself imagine having, because for 18 months she had not expected to survive long enough to need one. But that was all still to come. For now, in the gold light of a Syrian dawn, Captain Emily Carter was no longer a ghost, no longer a traitor, no longer alone. She was a soldier who had kept her promise, and that she understood at last was the only thing she had ever needed to be. The trial of Major Nathan Hayes lasted 11 weeks, and Emily Carter was there for every single day of it. She had told Colonel Reeves she did not care about being at the center of anything, and that was true, but she had also understood that there was no way to clear 6 names without standing up in front of the world and telling the truth. And so she stood. Day after day, she sat in that courtroom and she watched the case she had spent 18 months building come apart Hayes's lies one thread at a time. It was Victor Volkov who broke him. When they brought her to the stand, thin and pale but with a spine of iron, 3 years of memorized crimes came pouring out of her in a voice that never once wavered. Every shipment, every date, every name, every operation Hayes had sold, every unit he had sacrificed, every soldier who had died so that a man in an air-conditioned command tent could grow rich. She recited it all from memory, and the prosecutors matched it against the records, and it fit every piece of it until the pattern was so complete and so damning that Hayes's own lawyers stopped meeting his eyes. They kept me alive because they thought I was useful, Elena told the court. They talked in front of me because they were certain I would die in that facility. They were wrong. I did not die. And I remembered everything. I remembered it for the men who could not speak for themselves. I remembered it so that one day someone would have to answer. When she finished, the courtroom was silent, and Nathan Hayes for the first time looked like what he truly was. Not a decorated major, not the broker, just a small man who had traded other people's lives for money and had finally been caught. The comms logs from the Syria mission were entered into evidence in their original unaltered form, and when they were read aloud, Emily had to grip the edge of her seat to stay upright. Her own warnings transcribed word for word, her desperate calls to abort, and Hayes's voice cold and clear, ordering her to hold her fire while 6 men she loved walked into a trap. The whole world heard it. The whole world finally understood what had happened on that ridge in Syria 18 months ago. Captain Emily Carter had not caused the death of her team. She had tried to save them, and she had been overruled by the very man who had arranged their deaths, and then she had been blamed for a crime that was his alone. When the verdict came, Emily did not celebrate. She simply closed her eyes and let the words wash over her. Guilty, on every count. And she thought of 6 men, and she said their names to herself one by one the way she had said them every day for 18 months. Daniel Reed, Thomas Walker, Kevin Miller, Jason Cole, Marcus Hill, Anthony Cruz. "It's done," she whispered. "I told you I'd finish it. It's done." The Army did more than clear the 6 soldiers. In the weeks that followed, they were posthumously restored to full honor. Their records corrected, their families formally informed of the truth. Emily insisted on being present when each family was told, and it was the hardest thing she had ever done. Harder than the ambush, harder than the trial, because it meant sitting across from grieving mothers and widows and children and telling them that the man they had lost had not failed, had not been reckless, had been betrayed. She went to see Jason Cole's mother last. She had been dreading it for 18 months. Because of all the things she carried, the heaviest was Jason's last request, the words of a dying boy who had been more afraid of his mother's worry than of his own death. The old woman opened the door, and she looked at Emily for a long moment, and something in her face said she already knew. "You're her," Jason's mother said quietly. "You're the captain. He wrote about you. In the letters he never sent, the ones they gave me after. He said you were the one who wasn't afraid of anything." Emily's throat closed. "He was wrong about that, ma'am," she managed. "I was afraid of a lot of things. But your son was the bravest person I ever knew." She sat with the old woman, and she told her everything, and finally, when she could not put it off any longer, she delivered the message she had carried for 18 months. At the end, Emily said, and her voice shook, "He had a radio, and he used the last of his strength to call me, and he asked me to tell you something. He made me promise. She took the old woman's hands. He said, "Tell my mom I wasn't afraid. That's what he wanted you to know." That's the last thing he thought about. Not himself, you. He didn't want you to worry. He wanted you to know he wasn't afraid. Jason's mother wept, and Emily wept with her. And 18 months of a promise finally at last was kept. "He was afraid, wasn't he?" the old woman said through her tears. "My boy, he was afraid, and he told you to say he wasn't, so I wouldn't hurt." "Yes, ma'am," Emily said, because she would not lie, not to this woman, not about this. He was afraid, and he did his job anyway. That's what courage actually is. It's not the absence of fear, it's doing what's right in spite of it. Your son was the most courageous man on that field, not because he felt no fear, because he felt it, and he thought of you instead of himself right up until the very end. The old woman held Emily's hands and she nodded, and something in her broke and healed at the same time. "Thank you," she whispered, "for staying with him, for being there when I couldn't be. A mother's greatest fear is that her child dies alone and afraid. You made sure my Jason didn't die alone. God bless you, Captain. God bless you." Emily left that house changed. Lighter somehow, though the grief would never fully leave her. She had carried Jason's message for 18 months, and now it rested where it belonged. Victor Volkov's hearing came later. Emily testified for him exactly as she had promised. She stood in front of a military panel and told them the truth about the mercenary who had nearly killed her and then saved her, the father who had turned on the people who owned him to rescue his daughter, the soldier who had chosen the right thing when the survivable thing was to stay bought. "He had a long ledger," Emily told the panel. "I won't pretend otherwise. He did terrible things for terrible people, but he did them believing his daughter was dead, believing he had nothing left to lose, believing the loyalty he once had was a lie. And the moment he learned the truth, the moment he had something to fight for again, he became the best of what a soldier can be. He gave me his rifle when he could have kept it. He turned on his paymasters. He risked everything and he asked for nothing." She looked at the panel. "I would not be alive without him. 18 Marines nearly weren't saved because I was almost too focused on my own mission. This man reminded me that no soldier fights alone. Whatever he was, he came back. And I have learned that coming back is the only thing that ever really counts." They did not let him go free. He answered for the things he had done, and Emily had never expected otherwise. But his cooperation and his testimony, and Emily's words, and the simple fact that a broken man had found his way back to his own soul, all of it counted. His sentence was a fraction of what it might have been, and he served it knowing his daughter was safe and free and waiting for him. Elena visited him every week. She was rebuilding her life, her research, her future, and she never once let her father believe he was alone. The debt Emily had created that night in the Syrian desert had been repaid 100 times over, not in money, but in the thing that mattered more than money ever could. A family made whole, refusing to let go of each other again. The Marines found out who saved them 9 months after the ambush. Emily had not wanted them to know. She had told Reeves she did not need the thanks, did not want the attention, did not do it for recognition. But the truth had a way of coming out, and when the trial made her name public, when the story of the ghost sniper who had saved 18 Marines finally reached the men she had saved, they came looking for her. They found her at Arlington National Cemetery. She had gone there on a gray autumn morning to visit 2 graves. Her father's in the shared memorial that now honored the 6 members of her team, their names finally carved in stone with full honor, no trace remaining of the lie that had once stained them. She stood between the 2 graves, her father on one side, her team on the other, the 2 poles of everything she had ever been, everything she had. "I survived, Dad," she said quietly to Colonel Michael Carter's headstone. "I finished what I promised. I brought them home. Their names are clean, and I finally understand what you meant all those years ago. The right thing and the survivable thing aren't the same, but you do the right thing anyway, even when nobody's watching." She smiled through her tears, "Especially when nobody's watching. I heard you, Dad. I finally heard you." That was when she saw them coming. 18 men walking toward her across the grass. Marines out of uniform in ordinary clothes, but she knew them instantly, knew them the way you know people whose lives are tangled with your own, even if you have never met. At their front was a man she recognized from a single moment 18 months ago, a filthy sergeant on a battlefield who had turned and saluted an empty ridge. Ray Buckley stopped a few feet from her, and for a long moment he simply looked at her, and his eyes filled. "It was you," he said. "All this time we called you our angel, our guardian on the ridge. We didn't know your name, we didn't know your face. We just knew somebody chose to save us when they had no reason to, and it cost them everything." His voice broke. "It was you, Captain Carter. It was you the whole time." Emily could not speak. "We know what it cost you," Buckley went on. "We know you were hiding. We know you had a mission. We know that the second you fired that first shot to save us, you blew 18 months of cover, and you nearly died for it, and you did it for 18 strangers who couldn't even see your face." He shook his head slowly. "In 11 years in the Corps, I never saw anything like it. A person who spends their own life like water for people they'll never meet for no reason, but that it was the right thing to do." He straightened, and every one of the 18 men behind him straightened with him. "We came to say thank you. All of us. There isn't a word big enough, but it's the word we've got. Thank you, ma'am, from all of us, and from everyone who loves us. Thank you." And then as 118 Marines came to attention and saluted her. Emily returned the salute, and she could not stop the tears now, and she did not try to. One of them stepped forward, a younger man, and he was holding something, and Emily recognized him too, though she had only ever seen his face for an instant through a scope. Kyle Foster, the one who had frozen behind the wheel well, the one she had killed a man to save and then screamed at through a distance he could not hear, telling him to get up, to move, to live. "Captain," Kyle Foster said, and his hands were shaking. "I froze that morning. I was so scared I couldn't move, and I would have died right there kneeling in the dirt, except somebody I couldn't see killed the man who was about to kill me, and my sergeant screamed at me to get up." He swallowed hard. "I got up because of you. I ran because of you, and Captain, I have to tell you something. 9 months ago, I got married, and 4 months ago, my wife told me we're having a baby, a little girl." His voice broke completely. "My daughter's going to have a father because of you, because you chose it to save a man you never met. She's going to grow up with a dad, and she never would have if you'd stayed hidden, if you'd made the smart choice, if you'd been anybody other than who you are." He held out what he was carrying. It was a folded flag, and beneath it a document. "We couldn't figure out how to thank you," Kyle said. "There's no medal big enough. So we did the only thing that felt right. 18 of us and our families and everyone we could reach. We started something. In your name and in the names of the 6 you lost." He handed her the document. "The Carter Reed Memorial Scholarship Fund. For the children of fallen soldiers. So the kids of the people who don't come home can still go to college, still have a future, still know their parents' sacrifice meant something." His tears fell freely now. "Reed for your commander, Carter for you, and it'll fund the education of the children of the fallen forever. Because you taught us that heroes aren't remembered for how many enemies they beat. They're remembered for the lives they refuse to abandon." Emily took the document in trembling hands. She read the names. Carter Reed, her name beside Daniel Reed's. The commander who had told her to stay nervous, stay sharp. The leader who had walked in front of his men. Their names joined together, funding the futures of children who had lost their parents to war. For the first time in 18 months, Emily Carter allowed herself to cry without holding anything back. Not the careful, controlled tears of a soldier, but the deep cleansing weeping of a person who has carried something impossibly heavy for impossibly long and is finally allowed to set it down. She wept for her team, for Reed and Walker and Miller and Cole and Hill and Cruz. She wept for her father who had taught her the lesson that saved 18 lives. She wept for Jason Cole and the promise she had kept to his mother. She wept for Victor Volkov and Elena and the family made whole. And she wept at last for herself, for the woman who had stood on a ridge 18 months ago and lived when everyone she loved had died, and who had spent every day since believing she did not deserve to. She understood now, standing between 2 graves with 18 living men before her, that she had been wrong about that. Her teammates were not forgotten. Their names were carved in stone, cleared, honored, and their sacrifice would fund the futures of children for generations. Their deaths had meaning. Her survival had meaning. The choice she made on that ridge, the choice that should have destroyed her, had instead saved 18 lives, had cleared 6 names, had reunited a family, had brought a traitor to justice, and had planted something that would outlive them all. Some debts cannot be paid with money. Kyle Foster's daughter would grow up with a father. That was a debt that could never be repaid, and it did not need to be because it had never been a debt at all. It had simply been the right thing done at terrible cost by a soldier who refused to abandon the people who needed her, even when they were strangers, even when nobody was watching, even when the smart choice, the survivable choice, was to stay hidden and let them die. Ray Buckley came and stood beside her, looking at the memorial to her team, reading the 6 names carved there. "Your commander," he said quietly, "Daniel Reed. What was he like?" "He kept a notebook," Emily said, wiping her eyes. "Wrote down everything about his men, their kids' names, their birthdays, their dogs. He used to say a commander who forgets his people isn't a commander, he's just a man with rank." She smiled through her tears. "He never forgot a single one of us, not one. And he walked in front of us into every fight because he'd rather die than let one of us die alone." "He'd be proud of you," Buckley said. "You know that, right? You did exactly what he taught you. You didn't forget your people. And when 18 strangers needed a commander who wouldn't abandon them, you were there." He put a hand on her shoulder. "He'd be proud, Captain. So would your father. So are we." Emily looked at the 6 names and then at her father's grave, and then at the 18 living men who had come to Arlington to thank a woman they had never seen save their lives, and she felt something settle in her chest that had been unsettled for 18 months. Peace. Not the absence of grief, because the grief would always be there, but peace alongside it. The peace of a soldier who has done what she promised, paid what she owed, and kept faith with the dead and the living alike. "Come on," she said, finally wiping her eyes and turning to the 18 men. "Let me introduce you to them properly." She turned back to the memorial. "This is Commander Daniel Reed. He'd have liked all of you. This is Sergeant Thomas Walker. He had 2 little girls, and he never stopped talking about them. This is Specialist Kevin Miller. He was going to propose to a girl named Sarah. This is Marcus Hill, the best medic I ever knew. This is Anthony Cruz, who used to say the Army was the only family he ever had." Her voice softened. "And this is Jason Cole, the youngest, the bravest. He was afraid, and he did his job anyway, and the last thing he did on this earth was think about his mother instead of himself." The 18 Marines gathered around the memorial, and they read the 6 names, and they understood that they were alive because these 6 had died, because a woman who loved these 6 had refused to let anyone else share their fate. And in that moment, standing in the gray autumn light of Arlington, the living and the dead were joined. 6 soldiers who had been betrayed and 1 who had survived to clear their names. 18 Marines who had been saved, and the 6 whose memory had saved them. A father who had come back from the dark, and a captain who had led him there. A promise made on a ridge in Syria and kept across 18 months of exile, grief, and blood. Emily Carter had lost everything. Her team, her reputation, her career, her name. And she had spent 18 months alone in the dark, hunted by the country she served, hunting the man who had destroyed her, carrying the weight of 6 deaths she had blamed herself for. But she had never once abandoned the people who trusted her. Not her team whose names she cleared. Not her country whose honor she restored. Not the truth which she dragged into the light, no matter the cost. And not 18 strangers in a convoy who she saved, because a real soldier does the right thing, even when the right thing might kill her, even when nobody is watching, even when the whole world has already decided she is a traitor. Because heroes are not remembered by how many enemies they defeat. They are remembered by the lives they refuse to abandon. Captain Emily Carter looked at the graves of the men she lost, and at the faces of the men she saved, and at the fun that would carry all their names into a future none of them would see, and she finally understood the lesson her father had spent his whole life trying to teach her. Some promises cannot be measured in years. Some debts cannot be paid with money. And some soldiers keep fighting long after the world forgets their names. Emily Carter was one of them. She always had been. And now the whole world knew she had survived. She had finished what she promised. And she had finally fully come home. The war ended for Emily Carter, but the questions it left behind did not. And in the quiet years that followed, she found herself circling back to them, the way a soldier returns to old ground, searching for the meaning buried in what happened there. She thought often about the second she froze on that ridge in Syria. For 18 months, she had called it her greatest failure. But time and truth had taught her something harder to accept and more important to understand. That freeze had not been cowardice. It had been obedience. She had done exactly what a soldier is trained to do which is trust the voice above her in the chain of command, and that trust had been turned into a weapon against her by a man who understood that the greatest strength of an army can also be its deepest vulnerability. Discipline, loyalty, the willingness to follow an order even when every instinct screams against it. These are the things that make soldiers into something greater than individuals. And these are the exact things a traitor exploits. That was the first truth Emily carried out of the desert, and it was not a comfortable one. The virtues that make a good soldier are the same virtues that make betrayal possible. A man who will not follow orders cannot be part of an army. A man who follows them blindly can be led into a trap. The line between the two is not drawn in any manual. It is drawn in the conscience of each soldier in the moment when duty and conscience diverge, and no one can walk that line for you. History is full of that lesson, though it is rarely taught plainly. Every army that ever marched depended on men who would obey, and every atrocity ever committed depended on the same thing. The soldier who holds the line and the soldier who commits the massacre are often shaped by identical training. What separates them is not obedience. It is the thing obedience serves. Emily had followed an order and her team had died. She had also disobeyed the logic of survival and 18 Marines had lived. The uniform did not tell her which choice was right. Only her conscience did. And that she came to believe was the entire weight of what it means to wear the uniform. Not the willingness to obey, but the wisdom and the courage to know when obedience becomes complicity. She thought too about Nathan Hayes and about what made a man like that. It would have been easier to call him a monster, a thing apart from ordinary humanity, but Emily had looked into his eyes with a gun against his skull, and she had seen no monster there. She had seen a man, an ordinary man who had made a series of choices, each one slightly worse than the last, until the accumulated weight of them had carried him somewhere unforgivable. He had not woken up one morning and decided to sell his soldiers. He had taken one step and then another and told himself each step was small until he was standing in a place from which there was no return. That frightened Emily more than any villain could have because it meant that the road to what Hayes became was not marked. It did not announce itself. It looked at every stage like a reasonable choice made by a reasonable man. And she understood then that evil in the world is rarely the work of monsters. It is far more often the work of ordinary people who stopped asking themselves a single question. What do I owe the people who trust me? Hayes had stopped asking it. The moment he stopped, everything else followed. Her father had known this. She saw it now. When he told her that a real soldier never abandons the people who trust them, he had not been giving her a slogan. He had been giving her the one defense against becoming a Nathan Hayes. Because a person who keeps asking what they owe the people who trust them can never take the first small step down that road. The question itself is the guardrail. Remove it, and any of us could become the thing we swore to fight. This was the deepest truth Emily carried, and she spent the rest of her life trying to live by it. Loyalty is not a feeling. It is not warmth or affection or sentiment. Loyalty is a discipline, a daily practice of remembering what you owe and paying it, especially when nobody is watching. Her father had said those words in a hospital bed, and she had thought them beautiful and vague. She understood now that they were neither. They were the most practical instruction a person could receive, especially when nobody is watching. Because the whole world can see you keep faith when there is a reward for it. Character is what you do when there is no reward at all, when the smart choice and the survivable choice both point the other way, when keeping faith might cost you everything and no one will ever know you kept it. She had kept it on that ridge. No one was supposed to know. She had expected to die anonymous, a ghost who fired into an ambush for strangers and vanished. That she had lived, that the Marines had found her, that her name became known, all of that was accident. The choice itself had been made in the dark for no audience, for no reward, and that she believed was the only kind of choice that revealed who a person truly was. There is an old idea, older than any army, that a life is measured not by its length, but by what it refuses to abandon. Emily had lost 6 people she loved, and for a long time she believed their deaths had emptied her life of meaning. She learned instead that their deaths had given her life its shape. Because she refused to abandon them, she cleared their names. Because she refused to abandon 18 strangers, she saved them. Because she refused to abandon the truth, she brought a traitor to justice and reunited a broken family. Every meaningful thing she ever did grew from a refusal to walk away. The losses did not empty her. They defined the exact shape of what she would not surrender. This is the standard that history at its best has always held up for those who serve. Not victory. Victories fade and the names of the victorious are forgotten within a few generations. What history remembers, when it remembers rightly, is fidelity. The soldier who stood his ground, the nurse who would not leave the wounded, the stranger who ran toward danger for people they would never meet. We do not carve into stone the names of those who won. We carve the names of those who would not abandon. Arlington itself, where Emily stood among the graves, is not a monument to conquest. It is a monument to faithfulness, row upon row of it, each stone a person who kept a promise larger than their own life. Emily came to understand that she had been given a rare gift, though it had come wrapped in the worst suffering of her life. She had been shown with absolute clarity what a human being is for. Not to survive. Survival is the beginning of the question, not the answer to it. A person is for the keeping of faith, for the paying of debts that were never really debts, for the refusal to let another human being die alone and afraid when it is in your power to stand between them and the dark. Everything else, the medals, the ranks, the records, the names, and the histories is commentary. The text itself is simple. Do not abandon the people who trust you. She lived a long life after Syria, longer than she had ever expected to have. She watched the Carter Reed Fund send the children of the fallen to schools their parents never dreamed they would see. She watched Kyle Foster's daughter grow up with a father and then watched that daughter have children of her own, a whole line of life extending forward from a single choice made on a ridge in a foreign desert. She stayed close to Elena Volkov and to Victor when he came home, and she understood that the family she had helped make whole was in its own way her family, too bound to her by the strange and permanent thread of that one terrible redemptive night. And when she was old and people asked her, as they sometimes did, what she had learned from all of it, she always gave the same answer. She said that she had learned her father was right, though it had taken her a war and a betrayal and 18 months of exile to believe him. She said that the right thing and the survivable thing are not always the same, and that the measure of a person is what they choose when those two roads part. She said that heroes are not the ones who defeat the most enemies, but the ones who refuse to abandon the most people. And she said always that the most important choices in a life are the ones made in the dark for no reward when no one is watching and no one will ever know. Those choices, she believed, are the true history of the human race. Not the wars, not the treaties, not the names of the powerful. The true history is written in every moment a person could have walked away and did not. It is written in a commander's notebook full of his soldiers' children's names. It is written in a dying boy's last thought being his mother's peace of mind. It is written in a father laying down his rifle to earn back his own soul. It is written in a woman on a ridge whispering that she will not let anyone else die, and then making it true. Captain Emily Carter understood at the end that she had not been extraordinary. She had simply refused at every turning to abandon the people who trusted her. Anyone could do it. That was the hardest and most hopeful truth of all. The capacity for that kind of faithfulness lives in every human heart, waiting only for the choice to use it. Most people are never tested the way she was tested. But the standard is the same for all of us in the small choices and the large ones alike. What do you owe the people who trust you? And will you pay it when the paying is hard, when no one is watching, when it costs you everything? She had answered that question with her life, and her life in answering it had become the only kind of monument that lasts. Not stone, not bronze. The lives she refused to abandon, carrying her forward into a future she would never see, keeping faith with her exactly as she had kept faith with them. Because that is the one law that outlives every empire and every army and every name ever carved in marble. The people we refuse to abandon are the only part of us that never dies. Emily Carter refused to abandon anyone. And so in the truest sense there is, Emily Carter will never be gone.